The look on my son's face when he realized the crisp, professionally printed eviction notice taped to his apartment door was signed by his own mother. It was a look of such profound, shattered disbelief. It almost made me feel a flicker of pity. Almost. Hi, everyone. The channel calls me Grandma Helen. My name is Helen Carter, and I am 77 years old. I'm speaking to you today from my small, quiet home, in a town that my children once called a dead end, but which has always been my peaceful sanctuary. This is a story about a gift. A gift my late husband and I spent 50 years building. A gift of our sweat, our sacrifice, and our love. And it is the story of how my children looked at that gift and told me it wasn't enough. That they deserved it now. That their future was more important than my present. This is a secret I have held on to, because how do you tell the world that the children you gave everything for tried to take the very last thing you had? To speak of this is to admit a profound failure, a deep and personal heartbreak. So, before I begin, I would be so grateful if you would please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support, your simple act of listening, reminds an old woman like me that my story has value. It gives me the strength to tell it. Thank you, my dears. To understand how I became my own son's landlord, you have to understand my husband, Frank. Oh, my Frank. He was not a complicated man. He worked at the same paper mill for 45 years, from the day he got back from the service to the day he retired. He was a man of routine, of quiet strength, and of profound integrity. His hands were calloused from a lifetime of hard labor, but they were the gentlest hands I have ever known. We never had a lot of money. We lived in this small house, the one I'm in now, our entire married life. We drove our cars until they sighed their last breath. Our vacations were fishing trips to the lake a county over. But our life was rich. It was rich with love, with laughter, and with a shared sacred dream. That dream was the pension. To us, Frank's pension wasn't just a monthly check. It was a living, breathing thing. It was the physical manifestation of his life's work. It was the 50 years of him waking up in the dark, of him coming home smelling of sulfur and steam, of him working overtime on weekends. Every dollar in that fund was a drop of his sweat, a moment of his life that he had traded for our future, for our security. He called it our fortress. He'd look at the statement every year and he'd smile. "There it is, Helen," he'd say. "Our fortress. Come hell or high water, this will keep you safe." He was so proud of it. He was so proud that he had built a life where I, his wife, would never have to worry. That was his greatest gift to me. We raised our son, Michael, in this world of quiet, humble security. He was a good boy. He was our whole world. He was smart, and we were so proud of him. We didn't have the money for a fancy college, but he worked hard, got scholarships, and became the first person in our family to get a degree. He understood our sacrifices. He was grateful. He was a son any parent would be proud of. And then he met Jennifer. She was like a creature from another planet. She was a marketing executive from the city, a world of ambition and glamour that was a million miles away from our quiet, small-town life. She was beautiful, intelligent, and she seemed to utterly adore our Michael. When he brought her home, she was a whirlwind of charm. She praised my cooking. She admired my garden. She listened with wide, fascinated eyes as I told her stories of Michael's childhood. I was so happy for him. He had found this brilliant, dazzling woman, and he was so in love. But from the very beginning, there was a subtle, almost invisible, friction. A clash of worlds. I remember the first time she came for dinner. She looked around our small, comfortable living room, at the worn but beloved furniture we'd had for 30 years, and she said, "Oh, it's so." It was the way she said it, with a little bright, unreadable smile. As if she were a tourist, admiring the quaint customs of a native tribe. Her vision for their life was very different from the one Michael had been raised in. She didn't want a quiet, humble life of security. She wanted more. She saw our town as a place to escape from, not a place to build a life in. She convinced Michael to take a job in the city, an hour away. They rented a sleek, modern apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and gray furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. I tried to be happy for them. I truly did. This was the life they were choosing. But I felt my son, my quiet, humble boy, beginning to change. He started to adopt her language. He talked about branding and optics and leveraging assets. He started to look at his own childhood, at the life Frank and I had built, with a kind of affectionate but definite condescension. It was the simple life he had escaped. When Frank passed away 2 years ago, that condescension began to curdle into something else, something colder. Frank's pension, our fortress, became my sole source of income. It was more than enough for me. It was the security he had promised me, and I was so grateful for it. But to Michael and Jennifer, my fortress was no longer a symbol of their father's love and sacrifice. It was a resource, an asset, an untapped inheritance that I was, in their eyes, just sitting on. And they were about to explain to me, in no uncertain terms, why their future was a much better investment than my present. The campaign to conquer my fortress began subtly, disguised, as these things always are, as an act of profound concern. It started about 6 months after Frank's funeral. They invited me to their sleek, gray apartment in the city for dinner. It was the first time I had been there. The silence in the apartment was different from the silence in my own home. My silence was peaceful, filled with memories. Theirs was empty. It was the sterile silence of a showroom. After a dinner of tiny, expensive food that left me still hungry, Jennifer sat me down on their uncomfortable gray sofa. Michael stood by the huge window, looking out at the city lights, his back to me. It felt staged, like an intervention. "Helen," Jennifer began, her voice a carefully modulated symphony of sweet reason and deep concern. "Michael and I have been talking, and we're worried about you." "Worried?" I asked, my heart giving a little flutter of alarm. "Why?" "I'm perfectly fine." "We know you are," she said, placing her cool, smooth hand on my own, calloused one. "But we're thinking about the future." "Your future. That pension. It's a wonderful thing. Frank was such a good, responsible man. But it's a fixed income. And the world is getting so expensive. What if you have a medical emergency? What if you need long-term care down the road? That pension won't be enough. It's just not a growth asset. A growth asset." The word hung in the air, cold and clinical. She was talking about my husband's soul, his life's work, as if it were a stock that was underperforming. Michael finally turned around. His face was a mask of strained sincerity. "Mom, what Jen is trying to say is that we have an idea, a way to protect you, a way to make that money work for you, for all of us." And then came the pitch. Jennifer, the marketing executive, took the lead. She started talking about an incredible investment opportunity, a new high-tech startup her company was working with. It was called Innovate Futures. They were developing some sort of app, something to do with, I don't know, synergistic lifestyle solutions. The jargon washed over me, a meaningless torrent of buzzwords. But the message was clear. It was a sure thing, a ground floor opportunity. A chance to get in before the rocket ship takes off. "If we could invest a significant amount of capital now," she said, her eyes glittering with a frightening intensity, "the returns could be astronomical. It could secure your future, Mom. It could secure your future. It could change everything for us." I just stared at them. They weren't talking about my future. They were talking about theirs. Where would this significant capital come from? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Michael took a deep breath. "The pension, Mom," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "We want you to sign it over to us. Let us invest it. It's the smart move." Dad was a wonderful man, but he wasn't a modern investor. This is a new world. His strategy was about safety. Ours is about growth. I felt the air leave my lungs. Sign it over. They wanted me to take my fortress, the sacred monument to my husband's entire life of labor, and hand it over to them so they could gamble it on some app. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it, the disrespect, it was so profound I couldn't even form words. No, I whispered. The word is small, hard stone in the empty space of their apartment. Jennifer's smile tightened, just a fraction. The mask of sweet concern slipped, revealing a flash of cold, hard frustration. Helen, you're not listening, she said, her voice losing its silky edge. This isn't just about us. This is about you. Don't you want to leave a real legacy for Michael, for your future grandchildren? Frank's pension, bless his heart, will just dwindle away with inflation. This is a chance to create generational wealth. Generational wealth. My Frank had worked himself to the bone, just to make sure I had enough to eat, and they were talking about generational wealth. They were so blinded by their ambition, by their insatiable hunger for glamour, that they couldn't see the profound wealth they already had, the wealth of a father's unconditional love and sacrifice. The pension is Frank's legacy, I said, my voice trembling with a quiet, furious grief, and it is not for sale. That was the first battle. I thought I had won, but it was just the opening salvo in a long, grinding war of attrition. They didn't give up. They just changed their tactics. The investment opportunity pitch was replaced by a more direct, emotional campaign. Their visits to my home became weekly pleadings. They started talking about their struggles, their burdens, the cost of living in the city, the crushing weight of their student loans, the dream of buying a house, of starting a family, a dream that was always just out of reach. We're just treading water, Mom, Michael would say, his face a mask of weary despair. We're doing everything right, but we can't get ahead. If we just had a leg up, a little help, the kind of help Dad's pension could provide. They made me feel guilty. They made my security feel like selfishness. They made the very fortress Frank had built for me feel like a wall I was putting up between my son and his happiness. They were brilliant at it. They would talk about their friends who had received help from their parents, a down payment on a house, a trust fund. They made my situation, my desire to live quietly on the money my husband had earned for me, seem abnormal, almost cruel. All our friends' parents are helping them build their future, Jennifer said one afternoon, her voice laced with a carefully curated sadness. It's just what families do. I was being a bad mother. I was failing my son. That was the narrative they were building, brick by painful brick. I started to have trouble sleeping. I would lie awake at night, the weight of their disappointment a physical presence in the room. Was I being selfish? Frank had wanted me to be safe, yes. But wouldn't he have wanted, more than anything, for his only son to be happy? To have the life he dreamed of? I was so lonely. My friends were gone. Frank was gone. Michael was the only real family I had left. And I felt him slipping away from me, his love becoming conditional on my willingness to give them what they wanted. I was so afraid of losing him completely. The final brutal assault came on what would have been Frank's 78th birthday. They came over for dinner. They didn't bring a card. They didn't mention his name. They just came with a folder full of official-looking documents. After a tense, silent dinner, Michael placed the folder on the table. "Mom," he said, and his voice was devoid of all warmth. It was the voice of a businessman closing a difficult deal. "We can't do this anymore. The back and forth. We need you to make a choice. It's either our future or your sentimentality." Jennifer slid a document out of the folder and a pen across the table to me. It was a power of attorney form, a document that would give them complete legal control over the pension. "We need this, Mom," Michael said, his eyes hard. "We deserve a chance to build a life. Dad would have wanted it. You're standing in the way." "Kai's standing in the way." The words echoed in the quiet of my kitchen. I was no longer his mother. I was an obstacle standing between my son and his future. I looked at their faces, their young, hungry, and utterly ruthless faces. And in that moment, I knew I had lost. The fortress had been breached. Not by an enemy army, but by my own child, the very person it had been built to protect. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. I felt a profound, soul-deep weariness. I was too tired to fight anymore. I just wanted my son to love me again. "All right," I whispered, the word a quiet, final surrender. "All right." And as I signed my name, as I handed over the keys to my husband's soul, I saw a look of pure, unadulterated triumph flash between them. It was the look of hunters who had finally, after a long and difficult pursuit, brought down their prey. They thought they had just secured their future. They had no idea they had just funded their own eviction. Signing that paper was the death of something inside me. The soft, loving, and endlessly forgiving mother I had been for 40 years. She died right there at my kitchen table. And in her place, something else was born. Something colder, sharper, something I hadn't even known was there. It was the quiet, methodical, and deeply underestimated part of me, the part that had managed our family's budget on a shoestring for 5 decades, the part that knew the value of every single penny, and the part that knew, with an absolute and chilling certainty, that I had just been robbed. My children, in their moment of triumph, made a critical mistake. They mistook my surrender for stupidity. They saw my tears, my trembling hand, and they saw a weak, sentimental old woman who had finally been broken. They did not see a woman who was now operating on a level of cold, clear, and calculating rage they couldn't possibly comprehend. The next morning, Jennifer called me. Her voice was all business, the fake sweetness gone, replaced by the brisk efficiency of a CEO. "Helen," she said, "I've spoken to the pension administrator. To liquidate the account and transfer the funds to our investment firm, they'll need you to come into the city office and sign the final transfer papers in person. Can you be there on Friday at 10 a.m.? "Yes, dear," I said, my voice a meek whisper. "Whatever you need." She didn't notice the ice in my voice. She only heard the compliance. But after I hung up the phone, I did not sit and weep. I went to the old roll-top desk where Frank had kept all his important papers, and I took out a small metal box. Inside was my own secret, my own private fortress. For 50 years, while Frank had been building his pension, I had been building my own. It was the egg money, my mother had called it. A little bit put aside every week from the housekeeping budget, $1 here, $5 there. I had invested it myself, quietly, using the simple, steady principles Frank had taught me. It wasn't a fortune, not like the pension, but it was mine, and it was more than enough for what I now planned to do. On Thursday, the day before my scheduled appointment to sign away Frank's life's work, I took a bus into the city. But I didn't go to the shopping mall. I went to the county records office. I spent 2 hours with a very helpful clerk, looking up property deeds. Then I went to the bank, and on Friday morning, I went to my appointment. Michael and Jennifer were there, waiting for me, their faces alight with a greedy, triumphant glow. They led me into a conference room, where a man from the pension fund was waiting with a stack of papers. Jennifer slid the final document in front of me. "Just sign here, Helen," she said, her voice a purr. I picked up the pen. I looked at my son, at his eager, expectant face, and I smiled. A real, genuine smile. "You know, Michael," I said, my voice conversational and light. "I was thinking, you and Jennifer have been so worried about your future, about finding a good, solid investment. I think I've found one." They exchanged a confused, condescending look. "The apartment building you live in," I continued, "the Kensington? It's a lovely old building, a bit neglected, but good bones. Solid brick construction, always fully rented. I was looking at the county records yesterday. It turns out it's for sale. The owner is retiring. So I bought it. The silence in the conference room was absolute. The pension administrator froze, his pen hovering in midair. Michael and Jennifer just stared at me, their smiles frozen on their faces. "I bought it this morning," I said, tapping the unsigned document with my pen. "With a cashier's check. It seemed like a much safer investment for my future than your synergistic app." I looked directly at Jennifer. A growth asset, as you would say. Jennifer's face went completely white. She looked like she had been slapped. Michael finally found his voice. You what? He stammered. You bought our building. How? With my egg money, dear, I said sweetly. Now, about this pension. I turned to the administrator. I'm very sorry to have wasted your time. But after careful consideration with my new financial advisors, my son and daughter-in-law, I've decided that liquidating this fund would be a profoundly foolish and short-sighted decision. I will not be signing anything today. And with that, I stood up. I placed the pen neatly back on the table. It was so good to see you both, I said to my stunned, silent children. Oh, and Michael, I added, pausing at the door. You and Jennifer might want to start looking for a new apartment. As your new landlady, I can tell you that your lease will not be renewed. In fact, I believe you'll find an official 30-day eviction notice waiting for you when you get home. I'm renovating, and the rent is about to go up considerably. I walked out of that office, and I did not look back. The aftermath was exactly as you would imagine. It was a financial and social apocalypse for them. Their sure-thing investment, Innovate Futures, turned out to be a complete sham. The company went bankrupt 6 months later, and the founders were indicted for fraud. They lost all the money they had borrowed from friends and family, and their reputations were left in tatters. And they were homeless. They had been so certain of their impending fortune that they had spent every last dime, living far beyond their means. The eviction from their beautiful, expensive apartment was a public and deeply humiliating fall from grace. They tried to fight it, of course. They tried to claim I was mentally incompetent. But I had the records from the sale of the building, a transaction conducted with perfect, lucid competence. They had spent a year telling everyone I was a foolish, sentimental old woman. They had no idea that I had just been playing a role, gathering my resources, and waiting for the perfect moment to foreclose on their future. My son, he is no longer in my life. The shame was too great. The betrayal, on both sides, was too absolute. He and Jennifer divorced. She, I hear, moved back in with her parents. He is working a simple office job now, trying to pay back the mountain of debt he accumulated. He is learning, I hope, the hard, brutal lesson that my husband and I tried to teach him with love, that there is no substitute for a life of hard, honest work. And me? I am at peace. I still have my fortress. Frank's love, his sacrifice, is safe. And I have my new investment. The Kensington is a wonderful building. I hired a good, honest property manager, and we are slowly, carefully restoring it. I've kept the rents reasonable for the good, hard-working people who live there. It's a solid, quiet, and deeply satisfying business. The lesson I learned is a hard one. Sometimes, the children you raise are not the people you thought they were. And sometimes, the only way to protect the legacy of love someone has left you is to become a warrior. You have to be willing to fight for your own security, for your own future. Love is not a blank check. It is not an entitlement. And a parent's sacrifice is not a resource to be leveraged for a get-rich-quick scheme. It is a sacred gift. And if that gift is disrespected, sometimes, the most loving thing a mother can do is to become a landlord and remind her children that the rent is, eventually, always due. Thank you for listening to my story. Please, before you go, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is a solid, valuable asset. If you have ever had to make a tough choice to protect what is rightfully yours, please share your strength in the comments below. Love you all. This is Grandma Helen, and I'll see you in the next story.